I'm Morton Blackwell, president of the Leadership Institute, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this, our last Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast of the year. We live in interesting times. This morning's Washington Times newspaper has an item in it referring to coverage that our friend John Fund, who has spoken from this lectern, a piece that he published on the Wall Street Journal opinion online, it has to do with with so-called climate gate, the controversy surrounding the leaked, hacked and leaked emails from the Climatic Research Unit at Britain's University of East Anglia. John Fund talks about the credibility problems, including credibility problem for the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. You recall that these emails disclosed a pattern of deception and concealment and suppression. It revealed that they had deliberately, these leftist scientists had deliberately discarded all of the original data, temperature data on which they based their reports. Obviously the data were inconvenient truths, but John Fund has revealed to us some of the comments about this matter by the head of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, one Rajendra Pachauri, who said, "This private communication in no way damages the credibility of the findings." Then John Fund reveals more about Mr. Rajendra Pachauri. He quotes him as saying, referring to him, he says, "In the near future," he explains, "car use will have to be curbed. Hotels and restaurants will stop serving ice water, and guests will have their energy use monitored. Heavy taxes will also have to discourage people from flying and force them to take the train." And last year, Rajendra Pachauri called for sharp cutbacks in meat consumption because of the greenhouse emissions livestock are responsible for. That's what we're dealing with, folks. In 2009, the Leadership Institute has already trained 7,853 students and held 171 individual schools of our 41 types of schools. And since 1979, the Institute has trained more than 76,547 people, most of them students. You have before you our 2010 school schedule. Please take a moment to review our upcoming schools and consider attending one or sending a friend to one of our programs. For the list of all remaining 2009 programs, please visit our website, leadershipinstitute.org. And our flagship school, the Youth Leadership School, will be held here in our FM Kirby National Training Center on December 5th and 6th. That's this weekend. And we have 2 youth leadership schools to go in 2009, and we lack only 17 more student registrants for the Youth Leadership School to train 1,000 students for the second year in a row. You'll find information about this school and a nomination form on your table. If you know of anyone who might be interested in attending this school and helping us hit that 1,000 Youth Leadership School student number, please write their names down or and give the nomination form to any of our Institute staff members. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you Christopher Doss, who will offer an invocation and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Christopher currently is a grassroots training coordinator here at the Institute. He has been a presenter and adjunct lecturer at approximately 17 college and university campuses, as well as think tanks, public affairs institutions, seminars, and workshops, both in the United States and in Europe. Chris has drafted nearly half a dozen laws that have been enacted in Virginia and other states. He did his undergraduate work in political philosophy at Wake Forest University in North Carolina and graduate work in communications at the University of Oslo in Norway. And Helen and I visited Oslo in August for the first time in either of our lives, and we found it a delightful location. Chris, would you come up and offer an invocation and lead us in the pledge?
Thank you. Our invocation this morning comes from the prayer journal of General George Washington. If you'll join me, please. O eternal and everlasting God, we presume to present ourselves this morning before thy divine majesty, beseeching thee to accept of our humble and hearty thanks, that it hath pleased thy great goodness to keep and preserve us for performing the duties of this day. Direct our thoughts, words, and work, that we may with more freedom of mind and liberty of will serve thee, the everlasting God, in righteousness and holiness this day and all the days of our lives. Pardon our wanderings and direct our thoughts unto thyself, O God of our salvation. Teach us how to live in thy fear, labor in thy service, and ever to run in the ways of thy commandments. Bless our families, friends, and kindred. Unite us all in praising and glorifying thee in all our works begun, continued, and ended when we shall come to make our last account before thee, O Lord our Creator. Blessed art thou, O Lord God of our fathers, praised and exalted above all forever. Amen. And if you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you for that prayer from a conservative Anglican, which is welcome to me. Now, I present to you Matthew Hurt. He's going to give us a brief report on Leadership Institute programs. Matthew Hurt joined our institute in July of this year as a campus services coordinator and worked in the states of Kentucky, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. He works with conservative students in an effort to bring balance to university campuses. Prior to joining us at the Leadership Institute, Matthew was a candidate for local office in Rutherford County, Tennessee. He also managed several local and state campaigns, including a successful state House race in 2006. He has worked with such staunch conservatives as Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn, who's featured in the newspaper this morning, and former Congressman Ed Bryant. Matthew attended Middle Tennessee State University and graduated in May of this year with a dual degree in history and political science. Additionally, he wrote conservative commentary for the school newspaper and was a member of the Student Government Senate, where he advanced conservative policies. Matthew?
Good morning. I'm very excited to talk about the Campus Leadership Program this morning. In July of this year, we trained and deployed 25 field representatives to just as many states, and for 10 weeks, they started over 300 campus student groups, a total of 346 new student groups, which is more than the number of student groups started 2 years ago when we trained and deployed 70 field representatives. So thanks to the direction of our director, Brian Burness, and the great CSCs who I work with, and the field representatives, our training is now more effective than it ever has been, and we're very excited about that. As Morton told you just a few minutes ago, we do have a youth leadership school this weekend, falls under the department. We're set to train nearly 1,000 students for the second year in a row. I would ask that you either speak to Darren Iwicki or myself this morning if you want to get registered, or if you know someone who would. There is, of course, a green sheet that you can fill out as well. And on September 15th, we launched the single largest initiative that the Leadership Institute has ever undertaken, campusreform.org, which is a social mobilizing site targeted to the 2,376 universities. For corresponding with university campuses, working with students on those campuses to advance conservative ideals and combat leftist abuse and bias. And in October, we hosted an award for one day, or excuse me, every day for the month of October. We had students report leftist abuses for a chance to win $100. We did have winners every day, and one story in particular is a couple of students at Florida Gulf Coast University who were forced to read a leftist book about civic engagement. When the students became civically engaged and opposed the book, the professor was upset. The author actually got involved and wrote a column for the local paper, and at that point the professor stood up and said, these students are doing exactly what you want them to do. Just because they don't agree with your opinion doesn't necessarily mean they are less civically engaged. So Campus Reform has been a great success and a great resource to students all over the United States. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And now to introduce our speaker, I'll bring up here Darren Iwicki. Darren is currently an advanced coordinator of the Youth Leadership School at the including the one which is going to be very big here this weekend. Since 2007, Darren has been responsible for recruiting and running youth leadership schools across the nation. Prior to coming to us at the Institute, Darren served as the regional director of the Triad in North Carolina for the Bill Graham for Governor campaign. Darren graduated from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro with a BA in political science. There he was chairman of the College Republicans and helped orchestrate a statewide 5-day event entitled Morals Week, which was founded by the University of North Carolina College Republicans. Darren, come up here and introduce our outstanding speaker.
Thank you, Morton. Good morning to you all. Today I have the distinct privilege of introducing our speaker this morning, Delegate Scott Lingamfelter. Coming off elections in both New Jersey, my home state, believe it or not, there are some conservatives in the great state of New Jersey. Most of us do leave, though. In impressive elections here in the state of Virginia, there's still many tough challenges ahead for our nation, for our state, and us as conservatives. With health care, 2 wars, taxes at the forefront of our nation, we need folks to save our freedoms, to save our state, and also our nation. And thankfully, we have honorable folks like the delegate here who have done that and have championed that, both in his military service, which started back in 1969, I would consider it, graduating from the VMI, Virginia Military Institute. He graduated with distinct honors from VMI, later went on to join the United States Army and served honorably in the United States Army, active for 28 years. And in his distinct service there. The awards that he has won have been numerous, from the Defense Superior Service Medal, 2 Legions of Merit, the Bronze Star Medal, 2 Defense Merit Service Medals, Tour Merit Service Medals, 3 Joint Service Commendation Medals, Army Commander Medals, National Defense Service Medals. The list goes on and on. A round of applause, I think, for his distinct service to our great military and his high decoration. But he did not stop there. After serving our country, he continued to serve our country and at the state level. In 2001, he was elected to the House of Delegates here in Virginia, where he has championed the founders in the Constitution and limited government. The delegate serves in the Appropriations Committee, Education Committee, and Militia Police and Public Safety Committee, which I think is wonderful that we have a Militia Police and Public Safety Committee all at the same time. He has distinguished himself as a clear-headed spokesman for low taxes, education reform, and public safety, including the right to bear arms. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to our distinguished honorable speaker, Scott Leffingwell.
Well, it is truly a pleasure to be here at the Leadership Institute with my friend Morton Blackwell and Helen, who I see Helen in the Virginia General Assembly quite frequently. She's down there. And when I see her coming, it's such a relief because most people that walk up to me are looking for some wacky policy to be implemented. But I know when I see Helen, I know, good lands, conservative common sense policy to follow. So it's a delight to be here with my friends this morning. I have to say, I've read my bio, and I do actually recognize some of it. But I noticed here I'm supposed to talk about challenges facing conservatives. And I have a really unfortunate habit, and that is I don't write down speeches. And this really drove my campaign managers crazy because quite frequently the press would come up and say, can we get a copy of his remarks? And my campaign manager said, sure, take my copy. And so I'm here sort of speaking to you sort of off the cuff, but I want to spend a little time this morning deconstructing the election here in Virginia. Now, there's good news and bad news in this. The good news is I will attempt to be brief so that we can have questions from the audience, and I really enjoy that aspect of public speaking more than anything else, listening and hearing from you, because that's sort of the learning piece that many elected leaders tend to shun. They tend to show up, talk, dump out knowledge, and leave. And they're the losers in that discourse because they have not had an opportunity to hear from the people in the room, because they always bring a perspective, they always bring issues to the fore, and if you're wise and fairly adroit, you'll actually learn something yourself. And so the good news is I will attempt to be brief. The bad news is I have never been brief. In that regard, I'm reminded, and I'm sure Morton will send me an email if I'm incorrect on this, but I believe it was George Bernard Shaw who was appearing with a speaker one day who was given 15 minutes to share his views on whatever it was. And this speaker complained to Shaw and said, 15 minutes, how can I possibly tell all of these people everything I know in 15 minutes? To which Shaw said, well, I recommend that you speak slowly. I will not attempt to share with you in 15 minutes everything I know, because I don't think I could get to 8 minutes. But in any case, I want to talk a little bit this morning about the election here in Virginia. And I think it was a very, very interesting election. I would suspect that, and the Blackwells and myself were in the delegation from Virginia to the National Convention last year. And I think that if we had an honest discussion, we knew that it was an uphill fight last year. I believe we had an imperfect candidate at the top of the ticket. I think that goes almost without saying. I think we had a stellar vice presidential candidate. And I would tell you, just as an aside, that the people who mock her do so at their own risk, because she is tapping into a concern, a legitimate concern and fear that Americans have for the loss, the disconnection with the founding vision. And she doesn't say it just that way, but I am quite certain that that is what underlies many of her concerns and many of the concerns of the people in this room. But no one would have guessed this time last year that we would see the remarkable political turnaround that we have. Now, there are a few people out there who claim to have this sort of insight. I think they're silly, because most people a year ago were very concerned about the conservative movement. We were very concerned about the direction of the country. I, for one, felt that we were almost at a tipping point. And quite honestly, it was depressing. It was just frankly depressing. And so when Bill Bolling, who I think is a great American, when Bill Bolling made the sacrificial decision not to seek the nomination for governor, he did something that has probably gone unheralded in this state, politically speaking. And it really needs to be accentuated here. Because in doing that, he did something many politicians never do. They put the movement first. He put success first. Because he knew how important it was for us to win this election. And by doing that, Bill Bolling created something that the military always seeks in combat operations, which is maneuver space, depth within which you can operate and have flexibility. And that one action not only united the party behind a solid candidate, a truly conservative candidate, but it permitted us to spend time looking in detail at major policy questions that populated successfully the McDonnell campaign in the recent election. And if you recall, in June, Bob was talking about the issues that are in front of Virginia. Creed Deeds was talking about Terry McAuliffe and Brian Moran. And this was delightful to the ear. And Bob picked that up and was able to take these policies that we worked, and I was part of that group in the spring assiduously, and translate them into cogent positions for this election. They resonated. He connected with the people. He stayed on message. He never shied away from his conservative values. The liberals came at him with everything they could, including rummaging around in dusty file cabinets. I can't wait, Morton, until the liberals start rummaging around in my dusty file cabinets. They'll probably find a 9mm half loaded. But I don't know why I got off on that. And so I think it's very, very important that what the Republican Party, and I would suggest to you the conservative movement in the Republican Party did in 2009, which was very fundamentally important, is they decided we are in battle, we are going to get unity of effort, we are going to march forward as a team, and we are going to defeat our foes. And when that happened, We set the conditions for a successful November. There is no question about that. Now, so fast forward. It's now the 4th of November. We are now successful with a governor, a lieutenant governor, and a superb attorney general, and a personal friend of mine. Who are now going to take the reins of power in this state. And we added 6 members to the People's House that are conservatives and Republicans. And I have to tell you, I know the 6, and they are all solid citizens, and they will serve you well. And so it was interesting the other day, I received a call from the Washington Post who was doing a postmortem on the Kane legacy. And I said, "You're writing about the Kane legacy?" And she said, "Yes, I am." I said, "Well, are you making it up?" And she says, "Well, that's the whole point. I'm trying to discover it." I said, "I recommend you write about global warming." By the way, I happen to believe in global warming. I have evidence that it does exist. Since the Democrats took over in Congress, the temperature in Washington from hot air alone has risen 10 points. By the way, I will tell you that global warming is the modern day version of the Flat Earth Society. It's as simple as that. If anybody tells you otherwise, they're just silly. It's just the biggest hoax that's ever been played on the country since people said nobody landed on the moon. But that said, where we find ourselves on the 4th of November is similar to a football coach, an assistant football coach, who, in the middle of a rather uninspiring and lackluster season, you might relate to this, finds himself being called forward to take leadership of a team. Now, that assistant coach can have one or two attitudes with respect to that call. One attitude might be, "Wow, these people think I'm pretty good." That would be wrong. The other attitude is, "Wow, I have a real opportunity. I better make the most of it. I better make the most of it." That is where I will tell you Republicans find themselves today in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and to a certain extent with New Jersey as well. In 2008, Republicans at the federal level were not defeated. They were fired. The American people fired the Republican Party in 2008. And they hired the biggest flim-flam operation that has ever been constructed in the modern annals of political history. And I think that's been borne out over the course of the last year. Because no one who has done more to galvanize the conservative base than Barack Hussein Obama. And no one has been more successful and adroit at herding independents back into the Republican camp than Barack Hussein Obama. And so that's where we find ourselves today. Huge opportunity. The public, my friends, is in a firing mood. The public does not want to see the polity spend itself into eternal debt and mortgage the future of this nation for generations to come. Nor is the polity very interested, or the people very interested, in seeing the nanny state grow like a weightlifter on steroids. And that is essentially what is at work today. There has never been a more destructive policy proposal in the history of this country than what we see in the health care bill today. 1/6 of the nation's economy, my friends, 1/6 of it, to be taken over by the same group that cannot get the swine flu vaccine on the market. This is not good news. And so if there's anything that you feel, if you have energy to spare in this post-election cycle, make sure that your representative in Congress and everybody else hears it clearly. Resolved. If you vote for this turkey, you're fired. You're fired. And that's the resolve that the people of this country have. And so here we are in Virginia with a unique opportunity. Republicans have the entire top of the ticket, soup to nuts, increased majorities in the House, which comes to the Kane legacy piece when the Washington Post asked me about the Kane legacy and said, well, Tim Kaine says the reason he doesn't have as many successes is because of an obstructionist House of Delegates. And having been part of that obstruction, I had a little to say about it. And I said, well then, without going right to that issue, let me ask you, why did Virginians increase the number of obstructionists in Richmond? And the answer is simple. Virginians said yes to the party of no. No to higher taxes, no to more regulation, no to jobs-killing schemes, to include this silly notion that somehow if we accept unemployment benefits from the federal government that result in part-time workers now being covered in unemployment taxes and thereby creating a disincentive for part-time work at the very time part-time work is needed, well then, I'm happy to be in the party of no. The Democrats have wanted to use that to defame Republicans. I'm here to tell you that when something is bad, you should say no. And if you take offense at the notion of saying no, you, my friend, are in the wrong business. You're just in the wrong business. So I'm going to take questions. I know you just want to just jump right in it. I'm with you. We're going to do that in a minute. But let me finish up. Let me finish up and simply say this and then open it up to questions. Recall I told you the electorate is in a firing mood. And something I think that the press doesn't understand, conservatives want good governance. Conservatives are not looking to throw the government out the window. What they're looking is to throw bad governance out of the window. Conservatives understand that there is a necessary requirement for good governance. Bob McDonnell has a great opportunity to go to Richmond and work with appropriators like myself to get this $3 billion gap that we're dealing with under control in Virginia. And folks, let me tell you how we got there. Make a note. We spent too much. We spent too much. And I think it's time that the House of Delegates, the Senate of Virginia, and the Governor of Virginia do what the people of this Commonwealth are doing around their kitchen tables today, which is getting their spending in line with their income. Republicans have a chance. We have an opportunity. We need to go to Richmond, exhibit good governance, reject higher taxes, reject silly regulation, protect the freedoms of of hardworking Virginians and Americans and obey our Constitution, give honor to our God, and take care of our families as it is our obligation and fundamental responsibility to do. Thank you. And now, yeah, absolutely. You're talking to the guy that carried a huge amount of legislation in that regard. I have probably done more to advance charter schools in this case than anybody in the General Assembly. And in fact, I've got a bill right now that I'm looking at to further expand charter schools and take advantage of some of the technologies that are there. I think the McDonald folks are, his policy team is looking very seriously at expanding school choice. It doesn't make any sense not to. My wife is a kindergarten teacher in the Prince William County school system. She's for school choice. Good school systems, be they public or otherwise, have nothing to fear from competition. Nothing at all. The teacher unions want a monopoly on this. They will fight to keep it, but I'm itching to get back to Richmond to take them on.
Question over here.
Who was it at the Washington Post?
Hold up for the microphone. Sure.
Who was it at the Washington Post who said that the House of Delegates were the obstructionists to you?
That's Anita Kumar, bless her heart. She's
and
from
what-
New Jersey, by the way.
But is she a reporter? She a reporter for
She's
the
a
Post?
reporter.
And she reports in Richmond for the Post.
She reports in Richmond for the Post.
Anita, how do you spell her last name?
Kumar,
K.
Kumar.
Thank you.
It's always good to rat out the press. They always rat me out. Thank you. That was a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah, hi, I'm a retired police detective. I see one of your concerns, of course, is public safety, and I warn you right ahead of time, I'm a libertarian. When it comes to the principles of personal freedom and limited government and the prohibition of marijuana, do you still believe in the prohibition of marijuana? And if so, how do you reconcile your principles of limited government, personal freedom, personal responsibility with that belief in marijuana prohibition?
That's a very good question, and I do support the continuing ban of marijuana as a legal substance, and I do so based on my considerable time in the military dealing with young folks, young soldiers who, for better or worse, find themselves involved in drug abuse. Marijuana is a gateway drug. There is no question about that. There's all the evidence in the world to demonstrate that. Law enforcement community, some of the law enforcement community are very concerned about the amount of resource and so on and so forth that is used to prosecute people who use what they consider to be soft drugs. But I would tell you there's not a study out there that's credible that would refute the point that marijuana is a gateway drug. You could say the same thing about alcohol. You can say the same thing about a lot of things, but it is distinct in its position as a gateway to further drug use. I think it's important that any society, and I am strongly in support of personal freedoms, but I think it's very, very important that any society proscribes certain things that are hurtful to the community. I believe that. I think that when we say you don't drink and drive, we do so recognizing that there's a fundamental safety issue with respect to the behavior of an individual. The great fallacy of the modern era is that somehow your individual actions do not have a community or collective impact. They most certainly do. And it runs the full gamut from drug use to pornography to soft crime to shoplifting. Any person who violates the law or does so in the, quote, privacy of their own home, believe it or not, is having a community impact, will eventually have a community impact. And so I say that to simply say this, that yes, there are certain things that society should prescribe in the name of good order, in the name of public safety, and the war on drugs is one of them, in my view.
Another question over here, yes.
A lot of us feel, I'll speak for myself, I don't feel that the Republican National Party really reflects my interests, my values, and so on. And I've taken to the point of either trashing the mail or using the return postage envelope and sending it back to them with, why aren't you listening to me? Do you think that there's anything that we can do that's substantial that can wake them up?
That's not a throwaway question. That is a very important question. And let me suggest to you some thinking that might cause some of my conservative friends to think I've lost my brain. As an example, the direct election of U.S. senators is a bad policy. There was a point in time in which that fell on the shoulders of legislatures to pick those kinds of folks. We have created a monster in terms of federal election laws in this United States. We have created an entire oligarchy of people who are out of touch, out of step, and need to be out of office. And the reason I bring that up is what I'm suggesting to you is very difficult to change. It requires a constitutional amendment. It requires a lot of work to do something like that. And as you know, constitutional amendments don't happen every other moon. They are hard to do. And so, in one sense, I don't know the answer to your question except to soldier on and to insist on being heard. The Tea Party movement is not a creature of the Republican Party. Now, that has not stopped Republican elected leaders from elbowing in to get as much credit and rub effect as they can possibly get out of the Tea Party movement. The Tea Party movement is a populist movement that in many ways reflects your concerns and even mine, because I am in that tearing mood myself. I don't have a lot of people. It's really interesting. Someone said to me the other night, I was with my son, who's an Air Force lieutenant, the other night, and he was with a high school buddy of his, and we were all out eating dinner. And this young fellow is going to be working for the federal government soon in the intelligence community. He's a very good guy. And I asked him what he thought about things going on in politics today. And he says, Scott, he says, I don't really look at politics anymore. I don't have any heroes. I don't have any heroes in the sports world. I don't have any heroes who are political. And when he said that, it struck me that what a sad thing. What a sad thing that we can't find one elected guy or gal that we can say, okay, here's a hero. Now, there's some out there, they're budding up as the Tea Party movement takes hold. Where were they before the Tea Party movement? Where were they? And some, and Morton knows many of them, they're up there. But they don't have a big national stage right now, which is why Sarah Palin is such a raving hit right now. Because she's speaking to you. I can tell you she's speaking to you. So the answer is soldier on, be involved, don't flag. When you're tired and worn out and fed up, soldier on. Because the day that you don't, Nancy Pelosi smiles.
The guy in the far back.
Scott, give your assessment of how successful the Prince William crackdown on illegal immigration has been, and do you have any suggestions for how we could do it better?
I think it has gone fairly well. For those of you who don't know, in Prince William County, we, in our little corner of the earth, decided that, if your first official act in coming into this country was to break its laws, you probably shouldn't be here in this country. Maybe you should be somewhere else. And so what we did is we developed a relationship between the county police, the county government, and the federal government to train our county folks in dealing with illegals and being able to when they are discovered breaking the law, imagine that, when they're discovered breaking the law and you also discovered that they are here illegally, that you can hand them over to ICE and have them dealt with and maybe even, sent back to their original country. And that has had a very, very good positive effect. That alone is not the reason, however, that we're seeing a huge decrease in sort of the illegal problem in Prince William. It is cyclical with the housing industry, I would tell you that. And that as construction goes up, illegals are back in it. As construction goes down, illegals move elsewhere. Many of them have moved to Maryland. I am in favor of a fence between Virginia and Maryland. No, I'm not. Look at me. I am not in favor of a fence between. So that was a joke, Anita. So in any case, but you have to do that. You have to do it these days. The days of sarcasm have long been replaced, with something else. But the answer is it has been successful. More counties should do it. More counties are looking at doing it. The federal government is doing everything they can to move away from that agreement because they realize it's been very effective, and La Raza and other militant anti-legal groups hate it. And so if they hate it, I'm for it.
Okay, one more question. Go ahead. Everybody else has had their shot.
Thank you. I guess I got a second shot here, but I just wanted to say thanks for coming, Scott. It's always great listening to you, and you're a great asset down in Richmond. You said at the beginning that not writing your speech as you usually do and typically do not do, and here it might be appropriate to speak extemporaneously, but in a policy speech, wouldn't it be more appropriate, and I want to finish this, to write it down? And I'm referring last night to, watching President Obama. Now, he said a number of things. One, he said that he's going to increase the troops by 30,000 for U.S. He said he's getting troops somewhere else. He didn't say where. He didn't say how many he was getting. And he also said he had 54 countries or something like that with him. And on the other hand, compare that maybe to George W. Bush, who had nobody with him. And I'd like you to really speak, maybe if you can finish up with something about leadership here, because I think while to one hand, we could say that having 54 friends with you is great and it means something, and on the other hand, maybe at times you may not have anybody with you and you're doing the right thing. But without getting off a point, really maybe you could speak, in general kind of way, about leadership, about what it's going to take in Richmond to move things along.
Well, I think the first aspect of leadership, and I've learned this as a soldier, is when in charge, be in charge. When in charge, be in charge. Not when in charge, form a commission to be in charge. When in charge, be in charge. And I have spoken to my friend Bob McDonnell, and I've suggested to him that he needs to move efficiently, quickly, and with determination. He's term limited, and he needs to close in quickly on the policy things he wants to accomplish and then do them. Lead. Radical concept. Lead. And you know what? When you lead, some people are not going to want to follow, but most people will if you lead. That's a fact. Now, with respect to the current commander-in-chief, I do not believe a commander-in-chief can be a leader who does not believe fundamentally in American exceptionalism. If your departure point is that this is not an exceptional nation, folks, when the Air France plane went down in South Atlantic, did anybody call Djibouti? Did anybody call Nigeria? Did anybody call South Molucca to go fix the problem? No, they called the United States of America. Why? because we'll get it done. We'll get it done. Do you think that Poland looks to Russia as the guardian of freedom in the world? But which nation has walked away from its missile defense promise to Eastern Europe? Do you think a rational leader that believes in American exceptionalism declares when he's done standing for freedom, which the president did last night? He said, we're going to stand for freedom for 18 months. If you don't believe in American exceptionalism, you are disqualified from being a leader in the United States.
Thank you so much, Scott. We really appreciate it. I have 3 points to make. Number one, as you know, my wife and I are great fans of yours in addition to being friends. Helen really liked your speech, and she passed me a little note which reads, "Just think what a speech he'd have made if he had written it out." The 2 other points are, any day now, redstate.com is going to post a never-before-seen 1,700-word piece I have written on the use of the Republican Party as a vehicle for conservative principles. And I ask you to keep your eyes on Red State. And my final point is, Scott, I am quite confident that my 9mm isn't rusty because it's stainless. As a token of our appreciation for your coming, let me present to you a copy of this, the latest, almost brand new model of the Adam Smith necktie. Okay. If anyone here is interested in Adam Smith tie or scarf or other Adam Smith attire, just go up to the 5th floor and contact my assistant, Kathy Graham, and she will get for you what you want. I invite you all to join us on Wednesday, January 6th for our next Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast, and I invite anyone who is interested in a tour of the Institute building to meet with Seth Nichols at the podium after the breakfast. Seth, if you'd step up here so people can see who you are, if they are interested in a tour. I thank you all for coming. Look forward to seeing you again soon.